كثيرا طيبا وبارك فيه والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين وبعد. Alhamdulillah, we've been talking about the stories that we have of the end of the Zalimeen, the oppressors. We talked about Shaitan, who was the longest reigning Zalim. And Shaitan's zulm, extends from one individual. It's Shaitan, who goes out and influences a lot of people, recruits and gets an army, and then goes and attacks mankind for his own purpose. Then we had the story of Habil and Qabil. And Habil and Qabil, the story was of dhulm from one person based on a personal issue. It was against one person, but it was a dhulm that was never done on earth before, that it was established, the sin of murder, and so on and so forth. The story we'll just talk about is the dhulm of the people of Nuh alayhi salam. The dhulm of the people of Nuh alayhi salam is unique in terms of its reality, in that it was an entire community, right? The first time that an entire city had gathered together to oppress a man that Allah Azza wa Jal sent with the truth. And Allah Azza wa Jal describes the time that Nuh alayhi salam spent giving these people da'wah. In the Quran he mentions فَلَبِثَ فِيهِمْ أَلْفَ سَنَةٍ إِلَّا خَمْسِينَ عَامًا, that he was with them for 1,000 years minus 50, right? Meaning 950 years. And this is what they say was the time that he was actually giving da'wah to them. That the actual da'wah of Nuh alayhi salam lasted for 950 years. And at the end of that da'wah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says before He destroys, وَأُوحِيَ إِلَى نُوحٍ أَنَّهُ لَن يُؤْمِنَ مِنْ قَوْمِكَ إِلَّا مَنْ قَدْ آمَنَ فَلَا تَبْتَئِسْ بِمَا كَانُوا يَفْعَلُونَ, that those, no one else will believe except for those that have already believed in you. Meaning there's going to be nobody else except for those that have already believed in you. And we know that the number of people that believed in Nuh alayhi salam was إِلَّا قَلِيلٌ, as Allah Azza wa Jalla Himself described it. Very few. And qaleel is like maybe from between, you could say 3 to 10 people, right? It's a very small number. But the reality that Nuh alayhi salam spent 950 years calling to a people with the love of his heart. And in Surah Nuh he describes it, Rabbi inni da'awtuhum layla wa nahara. I call them night and I call them day. Meaning 950 years. And this is a prophet of Allah. Right? So he's spending his nights and days calling people to Allah. أَعْلَنْتُ لَهُمْ وَأَسْرَرْتُ لَهُمْ. I was out there in public. I was out there in their homes, one-on-one. I was trying to call these people to Allah. And I was called, anytime I called them to your mercy, right? لِتَغْفِرَ لَهُمْ, so that you would forgive them. And this is what Nuh alayhi salam is pleading to Allah. That I'm calling them, I'm not doing this for myself, I'm calling them so that you will forgive them. Your mercy will be on them. They will be forgiven. How did they respond? جَعَلُوا أَصَابِعَهُمْ فِي أَذَانِهِمْ. They put their fingers in their ears. وَاسْتَغْشَوْا ثِيَابَهُمْ. They covered themselves. They would see him and just hide themselves in his clothes. وَاسْتَكْبَرُوا اسْتِكْبَارًا. They would just behave so arrogantly towards him. They would treat him, they would bully him, they would call him all sorts of things. They would ridicule him, mock him. It's one thing, and you imagine in our lifetimes, if you've ever been bullied, right, in school. Like if you had somebody that just didn't like you and they picked on you in school. How many years did you go through of that? Like maybe a few years of when you were in elementary school or you were in high school or whatever it was. And then life goes on, moves on, you go into a different phase and then you get out of there. Right? Or if you had a family member that was, just abusive towards you, but then eventually you become an adult, you move out, you go live on your own. So, the abuse that most people tend to deal with is a number of years, right? Right? The pain of it can last, but it's a number of years. And then they get to go on and live their life however they want to live. But Nuh alayhi salam for 950 years. That's like at least, 10 of our lifetimes. We can't even imagine. And more than 10 of our lifetimes. Our life really doesn't start, our struggles really don't start until we reach an older age. Right? But 950 years, day and night, constant ridicule, mocking from an entire city, imagine. From an entire people. Not just one person. This is the mental, abuse, the verbal abuse, the toll that it might have taken on any normal person. That for over hundreds and hundreds of years, every single day to be ridiculed like this. And we know what this can do to people today. right? A few years of being verbally abused and mentally abused and just bullied constantly can make people struggle to live the rest of their lives, right? Because they have to now deal with all the baggage and the pain and the emotion that they're carrying. And for 950 years, right? Imagine the strength of Nuh alayhi salam that Allah Azza wa Jal prepared him with. This is why Allah says, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah does not put a burden on a soul more than it can bear. And we are not in our creation today, the form that we are in today, we do not have the capacity to bear hundreds of hundreds and hundreds of years of this kind of abuse and resentment and disassociation from the entire community. And they would walk by, and the majority of their dhulm was in the form of ridicule, was in the form of abuse. And we don't know the whole story. You can't tell a story of 950 years in a few ayat. So we don't know, but Allahu A'lam. But there must have been physical, just like with every single prophet, there must have been physical torture and pain and all this kind of stuff and beating him up or whatever it might have been. But for this, for this long period of time, Nuh alayhi salam bears this torture from his people, and again an entire people. And he's simply just calling them to the worship of Allah. He has this love for them in his heart. And you see the difference between the people and what they become established with versus a person who has genuine love and care for his people. So he doesn't respond back to them in the way they respond to him. They push him, but his sabr is so amazing that he never responds to them the way they respond to him. He doesn't go out and ridicule them. He goes and prays to Allah that these people, I'm calling them to your forgiveness. I'm calling them day and night. But when he has had enough, meaning when Allah Azza wa Jalla has also given the signal that he has had enough, his dua is very, very strong. His dua is very, very strong. قال نوح الرب وقال نوح الرب لا تذر على الأرض من الكافرين ديارا. Literally, Allah, do not leave on this earth any home for the kafir, meaning destroy everything. And on the day of judgment, when people will be running to the prophets to help, ask Allah to start the day of judgment, right? They'll run to Adam alayhi salam, they'll run to Nuh alayhi salam, and Nuh alayhi salam is going to be worried about his dua. He's going to say, I'm worried, I made this dua against my people, go ask one of the other prophets or messengers, right? But even though he made his dua, even though he was guided by Allah, even though Allah responded to his dua, look at the love in his heart for his people that on the day of judgment, he's still going to be like, I'm not sure if I did the right thing, this was the best thing to do, right? But this was the genuine love he had in his heart for his people, and this kind of sabr is not something you will find in any average human being. This kind of sabr is only to be found in the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But you see that how the extent of what people can do to good people. One of the things you learn from the dhulm of the people of Nuh is that you can have the best person. He can be testified to be the best person in society. He can be good. He can be loving. Everybody knows all these good qualities about him, but still you can have an entire people that will gather to torture this person just because they don't like what he says. So that you can be the best person you want to be, that doesn't guarantee that you're going to have a positive influence on the world around you, because there might be something else that they prefer over who you are as a person. And so this is why we have to be careful, even when it comes to our tactics. So how we deal with situations when we have dhulm from society and all these people around us, and sometimes our response is to be, let's just show them how good we are as a people, right? We have to be smart. That yes, that's a tactic we can use, but we have to be smart and say that's not the only thing that's going to create change, right? Sometimes you have to have other means, and the other prophets of Allah utilize different means, including resisting and protesting and fighting and all of these sorts of things. But Nuh alayhi salam was commanded not to. This was the first messenger that was sent to deal with the first case of shirk. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had an immense amount of mercy on the people. In the first instance, they were dealing with shirk in this way, that for 900 years he gave them opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. And after that, the hujjah, the proof was established over them that they're not giving up, they're not changing their ways. And subhanAllah, if you don't change your ways after 900 years, I think it's pretty solid. Some of us only give 2 years to people, right? If they haven't changed their ways, they're not going to change forever. 900 years Allah Azza wa Jalla gave them, and they still didn't change their ways. The first case of dhulm, Allah extended His mercy. SubhanAllah. First case of shirk, with Allah, that they're worshipping now for the first time other than Allah Azza wa Jal on earth since the time of Adam alayhi salam. So He gave them that extended period of time. But even then, their dhulm continued, and subhanAllah, there's a lot of things you can learn from the interactions of Nuh alayhi salam with his people in the few ayat that we have there. But the key thing being that it doesn't always matter how good of a person you are. It doesn't always matter how good of a person you are. Sometimes, it's the dhulm is determined that it's going to happen. Shaitan is working extra hard. And there's a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's a longer hadith, but he says, "Wa'lam anna al-ummata idha ijtama'at liyanfa'uka bishay'in." That if the entire ummah, the entire world gathered together to benefit you with something, they would not be able to benefit you except with what Allah had already written for you. And if the entire world gathered to harm you with something, they could not harm you except with that which Allah has already written for you. رُفِعَتِ الْأَقْلَامُ وَجَفَّتِ الصُّحُفُ. The pen has been lifted, the pages have been dried. وَكَمَا قَالَ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. But this is the iman with which we face the wrongdoing, the oppression in this world. That if we're going to get benefit, whatever is written for us is going to come, regardless. And whatever harm is meant to come to us, it's going to come, regardless. So it's to get rid of that fear you have in facing the dhulm that you have to face in your life. That whatever's going to happen, good or bad, already written for you, you're going to figure it out on your path. But there's no reason to fear this dhulm. And obviously, the larger the dhulm, the harder this is to practice. But subhanAllah, you see in this dunya how people are fearless, how they go and they face all types of dhulm. And especially our brothers and sisters that are struggling and fighting right now, we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to empower and strengthen them. Those that have overcome, we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to give them peace and stability. And those that are still continuing, we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to give them the sabr and the resilience to keep the fights going. But everybody in this world is facing a different type of dhulm. And from all the stories of the prophets, at least, and the stories of the righteous, we can derive ways how we counter this dhulm. Right, how we counter this dhulm. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to accept. Jazakumullah khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.